This is part 3 of my video series on what I consider the 10 most neglected maintenance items on these older Mercedes-Benzes. And I'm talking 25 years and older. And what I'm using for this video series is my newly acquired old 1980 280 SE Euro W126 sedan. It's kind of a unique car here in the US. But sure enough, we're going around this car and I'm making lists and I'm talking to myself thinking, man, I've seen this stuff before. I've seen this stuff a lot before. So in this video, we're going to cover number 5 through number 10 of those most neglected maintenance items. Number 6 is power steering fluid, and this is a big problem in my book. It's not just the lack of fluid changes, but it's also, in my opinion, the type of fluid that was used up until about 1985. You know, Mercedes recommended automatic transmission fluid. You'll notice that on almost all of these 1985 and older Mercedes, you're going to get steering box play after 150,000 miles. That's pretty early. Although the design of the box did not change itself down here, you don't see that kind of problem in the newer ones after 86. So I think that we may have an issue here with fluid. So I have a kit, of course, which teaches you how to flush all that ATF out of there and put the proper fluid in your power steering gearbox. It's not going to fix a loose box, but it's going to definitely keep it from wearing out any further. So let's open up Fritz's power steering pump cap, and we're going to take a look at the fluid. If it's anything like the fluid I've seen in 90% of the old Mercedes I run across, it's going to be really ugly, okay? So I'm going to use this fluid extractor to extract a sampling of the fluid, and let's see how it looks. It looks a little dark, but as it's coming into the bottle here, I think it's probably not as bad as a lot of them I've seen. So I don't think this is original. Let's pour a little bit out and take a look at it. See, it's still got a little bit of a reddish cast to it right in here. And it's not real dirty and dark. You know, usually it's really dirty and dark. But I'm not going to leave that fluid in that pump. So that's going to come out. We're going to go through a flushing system to get that all out and get the proper power steering fluid in that pump. And I'm going to put a link in the show more below this video that will give you more information on this particular issue. I should also mention something else here because a lot of owners aren't aware of this, but there's a filter down inside this pump. This is what the filter looks like on most of the models. So this filter needs to be changed. It's very important that you don't leave this filter in there for 10 years either, because once this starts to plug up, you may get issues with wearing out your box. You also may get squealing and other noises coming from the pump. Number 7 is brake fluid. You know, I can't recall the last time I saw a 25-plus-year-old Mercedes that had good, clean brake fluid in it. I'm serious. Every one of these I see, the brake fluid is old and dirty. So it's going to be interesting to look at Fritz's brake fluid. I would say from the power steering fluid, that's probably been changed. That's probably not original. But I swear I've seen cars that have the original power steering fluid and maybe even the original brake fluid in them. So let's take the cap off and take a look inside. Now, new brake fluid is fairly clear. You know, it's not totally clear. You're going to get a little amber color to it. And now I'm going to use one of my trusty curved tip syringes to extract just a little brake fluid so we can take a close look at it. Look at that. As it comes up into the chamber, you can kind of get a good idea of the color there. See that? That's not too bad. You know, I would say that has been changed at some point, but I would also say from the color, it needs changing. Let's put it into the pan here. Take a closer look at it. Not bad. Not bad at all. That's one of the better looking brake fluids I've seen in a 25-plus-year-old Mercedes-Benz. But this is not only a wear issue and a maintenance issue, it's a safety issue. So you really need to pay attention to your brake fluid. There's no excuse. We have all kinds of resources. I've developed a special capture tank. I have a manual. I have video instructions. I have a pressure brake bleeder that I developed. All this will help you flush this old fluid out of the brake system and put new fluid in it, even if you have ABS brakes like Fritz has here, which is very unusual for a 1980 model, by the way. So we're dealing with ABS here. So not only will I be looking at the brake fluid as I go along and fixing this car, but I will be looking at the rotors, the calipers, probably replacing the flexible brake hose. A lot of times, before I flush the old fluid out, I will take a look at the hoses and replace those. Those should be changed every 15 years. I mean, when those hoses rot that connect from the body down to the brake caliper, you know, they can act as check valves, they can give you spongy brakes and all kinds of problems. So we'll probably do the hoses before I actually do the flush, and then of course I'm going to check the calipers. If they look bad too, I'll probably have to replace those. There's no sense in flushing in new brake fluid if I've got other brake issues I have to attend to, which require opening up the brake hoses. Number 8 is motor mounts, and sure enough, as I look at Fritz's rubber mounts, I can tell right away they need replacing. Not only is the rubber cracked, but look at how much this is collapsed. You know, this arm going to the block of the engine should be sitting up a ways above the mount, but this rubber's totally collapsed, it's cracked, and you can tell the engine is sitting a little bit low because it's closer on the bottom. The fan is almost touching the shroud. This will happen when you have collapsed mounts. You'll have the fan come down and start hitting the bottom of the shroud because the engine actually drops down like this. So this is going on the list as something I'm going to replace, probably not immediately. I'm going to work through some of these other issues first, but before I actually start driving this car any amount, those motor mounts, those rubber mounts right there are going to get replaced. Now I do have rubber mount kits and instructions for a lot of cars, particularly the diesels, because diesels even need motor mounts more often than gas engines due to the heavy vibration involved with a diesel engine. Number 9 is wipers, and this is kind of plural because there's a couple issues here. It's not just the wiper blades, and you can look at Fritz's wiper blades. This is very common to what you see on these old cars. You know, they're starting to crack, the edges are starting to tear away there, so the rubber inserts are going to have to be replaced. It's very obvious. But there's another thing that you need to be very aware of on these 25-plus-year-old cars, and let me show you that now. Take a close look where these wiper arms bolt up to the shafts in the wiper drive mechanism. Why is there all this rust around these little rubber covers? Well, you want to know something? When there's rust, there's wear, particularly on moving parts. That's correct. If it's a moving part and you see rust, that means there's excessive wear. What happens is these shafts that run up through the body and connect to these metal arms never get lubricated, never. And they'll start to wear, and pretty soon you've got a wiper that's just slapping and making all kinds of noise, and eventually it'll stress out to the point where it'll break probably one or more of the arms underneath the dash. So what I've got to do here is I need to lubricate not only the shaft underneath these rubber pieces, but I also need to lubricate this little hinge point here, because this will wear out. I've seen this a lot. Okay, I'm getting a little bit of wear already, so I may have to look for a good set of used 126 wiper arms. But these pinpoints will wear out, and the shaft bushing will wear out. So these need to be lubricated. I'm not going to go over the details on how to do this in this video, but maybe in a future video when I actually do this, I'm going to show you how I lubricate these and what type of lubricant I use. Since I just talked about lubrication with these wiper mechanisms, it's interesting that number 10 would be lubrication of some key wear components in and around the engine compartment. Once again, this never seems to get done. So what I've done to do this is I've pulled out my special lube kit. This is something I've put together with all the different types of lubricants and special applicators. And the thing I like to use when I'm lubricating the hood hinges, the throttle linkage, and the latch mechanisms is a curved tip syringe. So I'm going to get my little container of high viscosity, 100% high grade synthetic lube here. And I'm going to pull that up into the syringe. I'm going to put the cap back on here so I don't bump this. So I'm not going to show you every single point, but I'll just show you how well this works. I can take this syringe right here and just come in and put a dab there and a dab there, and I'm going to come in behind here and put a dab here. And there's numerous points where I want to lube this. Then I'll come in on the throttle linkage, and this is one of the best ways to lubricate ball joints on the throttle linkage, because you can kind of push the lubricant uphill, if I could say that. So we'll lube that. We'll lube the hinge pivot points. There's a lot of them on this linkage. I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 points on this M110 engine that need lubrication. And then when we get up to the latch assembly, I'll go ahead and use the curved tip syringe, just come down in here and find the pivot points and go ahead and thoroughly lube that up, and I'll do that on both sides. I've always said that lubrication will make a huge difference throughout the car in how well it performs over the years and how well it lasts. So there you have it. That's my list. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, hey, can't you miss this or you missed that? There's a lot of things that might be issues on these older cars. And I want to stress that these are the things I've seen over the years that seem to be most often neglected. It doesn't mean it's the biggest problem. I'm talking about neglect. In other words, it just doesn't get done. I'm sure there's maybe 2 more or 5 more, whatever. But I just want to use this video series to show you 2 things. Number one, if you're going to own one of these old Mercedes-Benzes, there are going to be issues that you're going to have to deal with, even if they're like in mint condition. I've seen that too. A lot of these things, you'll get these beautiful old cars. I've seen this with the 560 SEC I've got, and this beautiful 300 SD Casper. You know, there's shift bushings, you know, hood pads, all these things. They need replacing. And a lot of fluids need attention too, no matter how well maintained the cars have been. So I want to show you that these things will need to be done, and then I want to encourage you to do them yourself, okay? That's really the intent of this video series, is just to give you the encouragement that you can get a car like this and you can fix a lot of these things yourself, because that's really what pride of ownership is all about. So be sure and check out the links below this video. Click on the Show More, because there's going to be quite a few of them, and I'm going to take you through all 10. Even though we just covered 5, I'll give you the links to all 10, more resources, where you get the parts, where you get the supplies, where you get the tools, whatever you're going to need to handle these 10 items yourself on your own Mercedes-Benz.